everyone, it's Joe from Homegrown Musician and welcome back to another video. So if you're one of about the 7 people-ish who watch the channel on a regular basis, you might have noticed I've been a bit inactive recently. Now I do apologise, however there's been a pretty good reason for that, and that's because I've recently started my master's degree. Now, one of the modules on my master's is actually composing music to film, which I'm enjoying quite a lot, and one of the scores that I've been writing uses quite a lot of MIDI drums. Now, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with MIDI drums because on the one hand, they're really practical. You know, you don't need to actually get anybody in to record, you don't need to book out studio time, so that's a benefit. But on the other hand, they do lack the human element. They're just never as exciting as a real drummer playing. Now, there are things you can do to add that excitement to your MIDI drums, and one of those things is to use ghost notes. So in today's video, we'll be talking about what ghost notes are, how to use them, and how to program them into your MIDI drums. So first things first, what are ghost notes? So you'll be pleased to know that ghost notes is actually a pretty simple technique, and it sounds a lot more complicated than it really is. So all a ghost note is when a drummer adds an additional hit very quietly in between the main hits just to give the beat a bit more rhythmic energy and life. Now this is one of the main reasons why MIDI drums just never sound as good as an actual drummer performing, because whilst a real drummer who's been trained properly will add ghost notes just to give the groove a bit more flavour, most people don't program ghost notes into their MIDI drums. So one of the best examples I can think of ghost notes in action is the Purdie Shuffle, made famous by the drummer Purdie. So I'll leave a link to somebody playing one of those down below, just so you can get a feeling for how the technique actually sounds. So now that we know what ghost notes are, let's take a look at how we can add them to our own music. So to do this, we're going to go and take a look at the drum part for the beat that I played at the beginning of the video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the beat twice. Now the first time round there'll be no ghost notes, but the second time round I'll add the ghost notes in, and hopefully you'll just be able to hear how they add a bit of rhythmic energy and interest to the drum parts. So when adding ghost notes, there are 2 main things that you need to think about: the timing and the sound. So first of all, let's talk about the timing. So what I mean by this is, where do the notes themselves fall? So the whole idea with ghost notes is that you're supposed to be adding additional notes off the main beat. So if we take a look at the example that I've just played, the snare in that lands on beats 2 and 4, and if we look at my ghost note programming, none of my ghost notes land on these beats. The idea is you want to fill the space in between these beats to keep it rhythmically interesting. Now you don't need to go crazy and add hundreds of ghost notes in between, it might just be 1 or 2. Remember, the idea is just to fill the space, not take over entirely. So the next thing you want to think about is the sound of the ghost notes. So on an acoustic kit, hitting the drums with different velocities will actually change their sound as well as changing their volumes. Just listen to the sound of the snare that's been hit very softly compared to the snare that's been hit much harder. Now this doesn't always happen with MIDI kits, and sometimes changing the velocity will only lower the volume of the sample, not actually change the sound of the sample itself. Now this might not sound like a very big deal, but trust me, your ear will definitely pick up on the difference and the ghost notes just won't sit properly. So one way around this is to actually use a different sample for the ghost notes itself. So I actually had to do this in the example that you've just listened to, because the snare that I used originally didn't change sound when I lowered the velocity, and the ghost notes just stuck out way too much. Now another thing you can do is take your original sample and maybe add some additional audio effects, probably something like an EQ, just to help change the sound. You can then use this new sample as your ghost note sample. So thus far we've only really been speaking about how ghost notes can be used in kits. However, you can basically use the technique in anything that's remotely percussive. So like I said, I've been writing a lot of media music recently, and it was actually a piece that I was writing for that module that gave me the inspiration for this video. It has this really cool bongo part in 5, and it has a a load of ghost notes in it. Now if I take the notes out, the beat's actually pretty simple, but just by adding these extra couple of little percussive notes, all of a sudden the bongo part feels far more interesting, and it just really speeds up the pace of the scene. It just wouldn't work without the ghost notes. So we'll just have a quick listen to that, and we'll see how the music sounds with and without the ghost notes. So that actually brings us to the end of today's video. Hopefully you've enjoyed, and remember to leave a comment down below to tell me what I should make next. If you feel like supporting the channel, please like, share and subscribe, as it'd massively help out.